fraud. The FBI's approach to such operations is painstaking and patient. Digital crime is not like a robbery on a street corner. It is a slow, forensic art. Agents trace servers and examine timestamps. They follow packet flows and subpoenas. They cultivate informants and build legal pressure. In Butler's case, the irony was sharp. A man who had once passed information to law enforcement was himself now the subject of a long, patient hunt. Investigators followed his fingerprints through conversations, transactions, and a dozen tiny errors that, when layered together, created a map. The perfect criminal does not exist. What does exist are patterns, repeated behaviors, reused usernames, similar server configurations, the faint habits of a human mind operating inside machines. The moment of capture was almost anticlimactic. Butler had left his computer running while he took a nap. That small act allowed investigators to capture a snapshot of the machine's volatile memory, the RAM, which under the right conditions can retain data even when encryption is applied. There was a password, briefly unmasked and held in memory by the routine of a software process. It was not a cinematic explosion of revelation, no dramatic confession shouted across a room. It was a quiet technical fact. A string of characters that, once obtained, unlocked databases, removed layers of obfuscation, and exposed the marketplace's underpinning transactions. What the agents found was astonishing in scale. They found names, payment flows, and server locations. They found evidence of the takeover and the ledger of thousands of transactions. The discovery allowed prosecutors to quantify the scope of the crime. Millions of numbers, tens of millions of dollars in potential fraud. The machine, which Butler had used to build an empire, provided the same breadcrumb trail investigators needed to dismantle it. The subsequent trial raised new questions that go beyond a single defendant. How do we think about expertise in a digital age? Butler's sentence, 13 years, was the longest hacking sentence in U.S. history at the time, a measure of how seriously courts had begun to treat cybercrime. The punishment reflected not just the scale of financial harm, but the way the internet enabled harm on a previously unimaginable scale. The sentence also carried a moral sentence, that knowledge could be twisted into harm and that a life of skills might be repurposed into a life of theft. But the case also invites us to look at the systems that enabled such a marketplace. Where do stolen cards come from? Often from massive data breaches, merchant vulnerabilities, and weakly protected payment infrastructures. Where do buyers find them? On forums, encrypted channels, and sometimes through seemingly innocuous services. In that space between theft and sale, marketplaces like CardersMarket rendered crime efficient. They made fraud scalable. They turned individual thefts into a global economy. And yet, for all the scales involved, the eventual collapse of the market came from the simplest of failures. It reveals a truth about cybersecurity. The human element is both the most powerful tool and the most fragile weakness. You can engineer defenses that are mathematically sound, you can compartmentalize access and build multi-party authentication, but a moment of fatigue, a nap, a rushed configuration, an unchecked default setting can circumvent layers of carefully constructed protection. Experts who studied the case saw wider lessons. Technology outstrips policy, law follows engineering. Courts struggle to quantify digital harm in dollars and years because the harm is diffuse, spread across jurisdictions and banking systems. For investigators, the Butler case highlighted methodologies that would become standard: collaborative probes across borders, building partnerships with private companies that host data and process payments, and technical capabilities to seize volatile memory and reconstruct transactions from ephemeral log data. For lawmakers, the case was a wake-up call. Adolescence in law enforcement's technical capabilities could leave entire economies exposed. There is another lesson here about identity and trust. Online reputation can be a form of capital. In legal marketplaces, feedback systems help consumers choose reliable vendors. In illicit marketplaces, similar systems create the conditions for trust to emerge among criminals. That's what made CardersMarket so powerful and so dangerous. The trust networks turned stolen numbers into fungible goods. Consumers, regular people, were the hidden victims, robbed of financial stability and then left to navigate messy restitution processes. The damage is cumulative and slow, and it often never makes headlines beyond the technical press. But perhaps the most human element in this story is not the scale of the crime, nor even the sentence that followed. It is the portrait of a person whose life moved between two worlds, the world of legitimate security work and the shadow world of digital crime. It's easy to cast Butler as solely a villain. It's harder and more useful to ask how expertise is cultivated and then corrupted. When we see a brilliant technical mind turn to theft, we should ask what social, economic, or psychological contours might lead someone down that path. Understanding does not excuse wrongdoing. It helps us design better interventions. When the last documents were filed and the courtroom doors closed, the case left a changed landscape. The practices that were exposed, the marketplaces, the tactics, the way fraud was monetized, continued to evolve. New platforms rose, new techniques surfaced. The speed of innovation in cybercrime never slackened. But law enforcement was not idle. Agencies learned how to extract evidence from the ephemeral, how to follow value through wires and into accounts, how to cooperate across borders. The balance shifted incrementally. Today, when you swipe a card or tap a phone, you inhabit a world that was, in part, reshaped by cases like Butler's. Payment systems are more closely monitored. Banks run more sophisticated fraud detection. Merchants patch vulnerabilities more quickly. None of that makes the problem disappear. It only changes the battlefield. In the end, the story of Iceman is not merely a crime chronicle. It is a cautionary tale about the double-edged nature of technical skill. The same mind that can secure systems can, if repurposed, break them. The same architectures that create convenience can be exploited for harm. And the same tiny human moments, fatigue, oversight, a nap, can topple empires. When we close the laptop lid on this story, we should not only remember the spectacle of a courtroom sentence or the drama of an FBI arrest. We should remember the quieter aftermath, the victims adjusting their lives after fraud, the investigators who learned to think in bits and volatile memory, the policymakers scrambling to understand a world that moves faster than statutes. And we should remember the human fulcrum on which so much depends, that expertise carries responsibility, that anonymity is fragile, and that the line between protector and predator can sometimes be thinner than we expect. If there is one last image to hold, let it be simple and sharp. A single string of characters, briefly captured in a machine's memory, that unspooled an empire. The digital age is full of such small hinges, tiny, almost invisible moments that can decide ruin or rescue. In the end, the story is a reminder that our networks reflect our choices, and that the most sophisticated systems in the world can be undone by the most ordinary human errors.